Okay, let's dive right into day 21 of the trial. This day really brought the focus back hard onto the cross-examination of Jane, Sean Combs' ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
And it forced everyone, in the courtroom and us following along to really wrestle with some incredibly complex questions about consent, coercion, just the messy reality of relationships.
Absolutely. And for our deep dive today, we're pulling directly from ABC News coverage transcript. So, right from the courtroom action. Gives us a real sense of how the strategies played out.
Right. And our mission basically is to unpack Jane's second day under cross-examination. Try to understand the defense's strategy, which was pretty aggressive. See how the prosecution countered, bring in some expert insights on, abuse dynamics.
Yeah.
And even touch on some surprising background stuff that came up, like old rap rivalries, believe it or not.
It was definitely a packed day, really challenging stuff.
So the defense spent a lot of time challenging her testimony.
They really did. And their main tool, her own words, specifically text messages from around the time she says she was being controlled.
And the lawyer, Tenny Garagos, he didn't just, show the texts. He spent hours on them.
Yeah, hours.
Sometimes jumping around chronologically, trying to paint this picture that just didn't line up with what she was saying on the stand.
Exactly. That was the core tactic. Put her texts from then next to her testimony now and just highlight anything that looked like a contradiction.
Make the jury wonder.
Right. Make them ask, if she was really being forced, why would she text this?
And some of those texts, hearing them after her emotional testimony the day before, they were pretty jarring.
Definitely.
Like texts where she seemed to be the one initiating sexual conversation. They put one up, quoted directly, "What are you doing baby horny for me?"
And that's exactly the kind of thing the defense wants the jury to hear, to plant that seed of doubt about coercion. They also brought up things she testified doing, like buying certain items.
The matching shorts.
The matching shorts for Combs and the escorts to wear during those hotel nights, and erection pills, too.
That detail about the shorts apparently really caught Pieper's attention in the courtroom. The defense wants that to look like she was actively participating.
Totally. But she had an explanation, said she bought them because, she found them more attractive and hoped it would just make the night go faster.
So, same action, but two totally different ways to see the motive behind it.
Exactly. Was it helping out? Or was it just coping?
A way to get through it.
Yeah. And the defense layered this with her testimony about her birthday, the really controversial part where she said she was made to have sex with 3 escorts.
Right. And then the defense reads this text she sent then. "I'm given my gift, I'm taking a pill, and awaiting an entertainer."
They're zeroing in on that language,
Yeah.
awaiting an entertainer, pitting it against her testimony of being made to.
Trying to build this narrative that she was involved, maybe even looking forward to it.
That's the implication they're aiming for.
And they went even further. Showed texts where she said she loved Combs, talked about their great sexual chemistry.
After some of the events she described as upsetting or, disgusting.
That's crucial for the defense, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're basically saying, look, how can you feel used 1 minute and then text, "I love Sean Combs," the next?
They want it to look like just a normal, albeit maybe dramatic, consensual relationship. Not coercion.
Right.
What about the stuff about the fancy restaurants? Poppy Steakhouse, Carbone, and the new hotel. What was the angle there?
Well, the suggestion was, she wasn't being held captive or trafficked. She wanted to be out with him, wanted that lifestyle. And maybe, just maybe, her anger later was actually about jealousy, him seeing other people, not about being forced into anything sexual.
And her answer about Poppy's Steakhouse, I wouldn't know. The defense probably hoped that sounded evasive.
Could be. Or maybe she just genuinely didn't register the ambiance because of, everything else going on. But yeah, the defense wants it to look like she's hiding something.
Every little detail, it seems, was aimed at chipping away at her story.
Pretty much. Undermining her credibility, offering other explanations for why she felt or acted the way she did.
They even played that audio clip.
Yeah, audio only. Described as Combs making, kissy sounds to comfort her when she was depressed.
Trying to show a softer side of him.
Exactly. A kinder, gentler light, as the source put it. Contrast that with the prosecution's narrative of abuse.
And they pointed out that 2-month period where she said there were no hotel nights with male escorts.
Right. Suggesting, when she didn't want to, he obliged. He wasn't forcing her every time.
Trying to show she had some control, that it wasn't constant coercion.
That's the defense picture they're painting.
Okay, so hours of texts, specific actions, moments where he apparently backed off. Let's shift to the legal strategy behind all this. How did the experts see it?
Well, the legal analysts cited in the source material, they pretty much agreed. The goal with all those texts, so doubt.
Standard defense playbook, really.
Absolutely. It's criminal law 101. They don't have to prove anything. Just create reasonable doubt about the prosecution's case.
And hours of her own words seeming to contradict her testimony, that could definitely make a jury pause.
For sure. They might even be hoping for a hung jury, if they can just convince one or two jurors she's not reliable.
But the prosecution and the legal experts quoted, they had a strong counter, saying these texts, even the affectionate ones or the ones initiating contact, they can actually fit within the context of an abusive relationship.
Right. And this is where the concept of a trauma bond comes in.
Explain that a bit.
Well, experts like Beverly Gooden described it. It's this dynamic where the person hurting you is also the person you want or need or seek comfort from.
The one causing the pain is also the source of something else. Affection, maybe. Security, even if it's false.
Exactly. It's incredibly confusing. It makes it so hard to leave or even to see the abuse clearly when you're in it because it's not all bad all the time.
So it explains why someone might send loving texts, even amidst horrible experiences.
Precisely. Abusive relationships aren't just constant violence. They're often good moments, moments of connection. Survivors cling to those, hope the good person comes back. That whole cycle is part of the control.
And that speaks directly to the defense, focusing on those loving texts or the ones where she initiated sexual talk.
It does, and it tackles that tricky question the source raised. How can you be a victim if you initiated sex sometimes?
Right.
The expert perspective was really important here. Victims still have desires. Initiating contact doesn't automatically mean enthusiastic consent was there, especially if there's this backdrop, this pattern of control.
Consent has to be enthusiastic, freely given.
Yes. The expert made a clear distinction. Kink needs enthusiastic consent. Abuse doesn't have it. If that pattern of control erodes true consent, it doesn't matter who sent the first text, it can still be abuse.
Okay, now what about the defense argument that Combs wasn't always forcing her? That he sometimes obliged her wishes, like getting a different escort or skipping nights?
This is where the strategy gets really interesting, almost like a calculated risk.
How so?
Because while arguing he sometimes accommodated her might weaken the sex trafficking charge, which needs that element of consistent force or coercion. Legal experts pointed out it could actually, maybe unintentionally, strengthen the other charge, transportation to engage in prostitution.
Wait, how does showing he sometimes listened help the prosecution on that charge?
Because, as the source noted, there's not much argument that the entertainers were paid for sex.
Okay.
So if the defense is saying, well, he just got her a different paid escort, one she liked better, they're basically admitting he was arranging and transporting people for paid sex acts.
So even if she wasn't trafficked in the strictest sense because she sometimes agreed to a particular person,
he was still facilitating transportation for prostitution.
So the defense might be, like the source quoted, eating the lesser charge to try to beat the higher one.
That's the potential strategic gamble experts saw. Concede the transportation part, maybe, to fight the much more serious trafficking charge? It's high stakes.
Wow, okay. And before we move on, that juror issue that came up.
Oh, right. The prosecutor alleging a black male juror wasn't completely honest during jury selection.
Lacked candor was the term.
Yes. And the defense pushed back strongly, calling it a thinly veiled attack on a black juror.
The judge put off dealing with it, but the experts noted, even if a juror gets replaced by an alternate.
It doesn't necessarily mean a mistrial. The trial can usually just continue with the alternate.
Got it. Okay, shifting gears just a bit. Beyond the legal tactics, the source also touched on the human cost, the experience of testifying.
Yeah, that was powerful. Especially for survivors of alleged abuse, it takes an incredible toll.
The expert, Beverly Gooden again, she called it re-traumatizing, also terrifying and exposing.
Makes sense. You're reliving maybe the worst times of your life in public with the person you're accusing right there under hostile questioning.
She explained how it can feel like the survivor is the one on trial.
Totally. Because the defense questions everything. Why did you stay? Why didn't you tell anyone? Why did you send that text? Why weren't you crying on the stand?
This immense pressure to be perfect.
Yeah, perfectly calm, perfectly consistent, believable. But trauma isn't neat. Relationships aren't neat. It highlights just how incredibly difficult it is to be a witness in these kinds of cases.
And then, kind of out of left field, The trial also brought in these other elements from Combs' public life, these long-running rivalries.
Yeah, it added this whole other layer, almost like historical context for the world he operates in.
Like the beef with 50 Cent. That goes back to 2001.
Apparently. Started with 50 Cent saying he ghost wrote for Combs, then years of social media attacks, digs about their vodka brands, Ciroc versus Effin.
Oh yeah, the vodka wars.
And fights over artists like May wanting off Bad Boy. It's a very public, long-running feud.
And the Siege Night rivalry, too.
Mm-hmm. Testimony from an ex-assistant about seeing Knight at Mel's diner, and Combs, supposedly armed, making the assistant go with him to confront Knight.
Wow, that's a specific, intense claim.
And the roots of that Diddy Suge Knight thing go way, way back.
Mid-90s, East Coast versus West Coast hip-hop.
Exactly. Bad Boy Records versus Death Row Records.
Biggie versus Tupac, that whole era.
It's this foundational conflict in music history that somehow still echoes or pops up in relation to things happening now.
Just gives you a glimpse, I guess, into the environment, the pressures, the conflicts surrounding him, besides the personal stuff in the trial.
It paints a broader, more complex picture.
So, yeah, day 21, a really complex day. Forced everyone to think about consent, control, how you weigh testimony against texts.
And even how these old beefs can surface.
It really shows how you need to look at these things from so many angles. The legal strategy, the psychology, the human cost, the wider context.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder of how hard it is to get to the truth in situations like this.
It really is. Yeah. And it leaves you, I think, with a pretty big question to mull over. How do we, or how does a jury make sense of the inherent messiness of human relationships? You know, the moments of love or connection, right alongside potential pain and control, especially when the goal is legal justice.
Yeah. And what does a trial like this really tell us about the challenge of understanding coercion, particularly when it's not just obvious physical force, but maybe something more subtle, like a pattern of control?
Definitely something to keep thinking about long after the headlines fade.